It's a shame a lot of people don't love the Greenskins right now. I love them aesthetically, thematically, you know, classically. Orcs and goblins are 100% part of the whole fantasy universe thing. But because theirs have been so strong for so long in Total War Warhammer multiplayer, most people are sick of seeing them. But let's have some fun today. I brought a bunch of Goblin Wolf Chariots against Rider Rohan's High Elves here. We've got a Goblin Great Shaman up on the Spider, which I do still appreciate that this was done. At one point I was going to do a stream where all the builds I took were with this guy. He's quite good in many situations, super expensive, can be pretty risky because he's so expensive, but just having monster mounts for casters, I'm a big fan of. I think all factions should have monster mounts for almost all their casters. That's a discussion for another day. Yeah, Wolf Chariots here. One interesting thing to note about Wolf Chariots, talked recently about the Skeleton Chariots. Wolf Chariots are the only other chariots that have more than 3 unit models, coming in at 6 unit models. Pretty poor charge and weapon strength, but they're very cheap as well. Also have a ranged attack. Couple of Black Orcs. Got the 8-peaked loons here. Gobbos up front. Gobbo Big Boss. Goblin Archers. Night Goblin Archers as well. And 2 Savage Orcs just to kind of contest this flank here with their high charge. Hammer of Gork in the back, providing that blinded debuff on some Rangers here. Rangers are going to get into combat against these Goblins immediately. Got a couple more Rangers out here. Lothran Seaguard. Hilariel the Radiant leading the way along with some Silver Helms. Yeah, good stuff. Arcane Phoenix up in the air, or on the ground already, rather. I do think this was a mistake from Rider Rohan based on what he said while we were playing. To come down, dive on the Goblin Archers. Does get a little bit of damage in, not able to terrify them away. But the Chariots are turning up and around the flank. You can see them kind of poking. They're not really doing much damage. I don't think... Yeah, they might have killed like 1 or 2 of those Silver Guard, maybe. But mostly just to be annoying and to pressure this backline. Come in and get some charges as well, potentially. Goblins ate the attack initially of those Rangers, but now comes the Black Orcs and the Spider. Spider Shaman getting in here with his Shrine. A little bit of sneaky stabbing on those Black Orcs over there so they can just clean the clocks out of those Silver Helms. Also Wasp, they're up to 84 melee attack and 72 weapon damage. I mean, that's going to be a bad time. We've also got a Gobbo Big Boss on foot here, supporting, just for some extra leadership in the front line. The Rangers end up beating Savage Orcs, even with Wa, which was... maybe surprising to me. I mean, granted, these Lothran Seaguard are probably also contributing a little bit of damage there. Some friendly fire also on those Black Orcs from my catapult, which is fine. But this is actually a pretty decent trade for Rider Rohan here. Value-wise, the Rangers, I mean, that's pretty close to what you would expect. 550 versus 600 cost unit, but still ends up being beneficial for him. Silver Helms getting to the back line here, just massacring Goblin Archers. Thankfully, the Overwatch from the other 2 should be enough to eventually get rid of them. But here we go, the Gobbo Chariot. Yes, I love Goblin Chariots. They're one of the most ridiculous units in the game, and the Teeth Breakers especially, the Regiment Renown. I mean, they have Vanguard, and I think that's pretty much it. But anyway, Shield of Thorns here, a little bit of physical resistance and weapon damage for everything that's fighting. Did actually hit the Phoenix as well, so it's got tons of resistances right now. A nice flaming diarrhea cone on those Black Orcs should also deal some pretty significant damage. So Rider Rohan definitely not going quietly into that good night. Those Silver Helms, I said they were going to get seen off by the Archers, but maybe not. They actually overrun into the Goblin Archers, Night Goblin Archers, start to take out the Poisoners. Goblin Wolf Chariots, 1's down, the other 3 managed to pull out of there, and we're going to go again for another multi-charge. This is the great thing about Chariots, and especially Chariots with extra unit models, is they can come in and literally hit like several units at once and hit all of the models in the unit pretty much, whereas a normal, 3 model count Chariot unit is not going to be able to hit as many models on contact. These guys can come in and occupy the entire unit. Yes, they're taking damage, but because they're so cheap, really not too much of an issue. But this big pitched engagement over here, Alariel's going to throw Heart of Avalorn. These Black Orcs got Sneaky Stabbing and Crown of Command to make them unbreakable. There's only 26 of them. They definitely would have routed. But Crown of Command from the Gobbo Great Shaman keeps them fighting very critically. We're also going to throw, it looks like, another Shield of Thorns probably from Alariel, yep, to fight that kind of pitched engagement there. Over the rest of the battle, I mean, the Silver Helms, credit to them, 148 kills, probably a ton of damage value. Still couldn't get through this entire backline of Goblins. There's just too many Goblins here. So they eventually get routed off, just like these Black Orcs once that Crown of Command ceases to be. Likewise, the poor Goblin Great Shaman. He didn't take a lot of damage, but maybe he did. Got terrified away there by the big, scary Arcane Phoenix. But we still got basically untouched unit of Black Orcs here to come fight on top of. Another flaming cone of diarrhea. Oh yeah, right on the spider. And look at that little gobbo up top. That is an awesome shot right there. Such a beautiful game, honestly. I don't know how much damage that actually did to the Shaman either. I wasn't really paying attention to the health bars, as you saw. But anyway, a couple of elves get terrified away there. Black Orcs take some damage from that, but they are mostly still okay. The Wolf Chariots also at this point being used mostly to chase routing tattered units, as they themselves are quite tattered. But like here, I don't know if these Lothern Seaguard get their bracing bonuses for the initial few, but I doubt for the entire block of chariots, and regardless with the anti-infantry, they come in, do enough damage. Still got blinded debuff going from Hammer of Gork on anything that it hits, which is just fantastic. Another Shield of Thorns from Alariel. That base weapon damage will help the Silvern Guard in particular. Oh man, some brutal friendly fire too, but yeah, that blinded debuff, you can see down to 4 and 18. Probably the most underrated artillery piece in the entire game. Hammer of Gork is something that a lot of Greenskins players, I don't see them using, but in certain matchups, especially against Elves, which High Elves being kind of the slowest of the 3 Elves, it's probably arguably the easiest to protect artillery against them, and that their stats being so good, especially with martial prowess, like the blinded debuff, it's almost a direct counter to it, right? So in this particular matchup, and against the Lizardmen too, actually, I think those are probably the 2 matchups where I like using Hammer of Gork the most. But anyway, Rider Rohan's going to go for a heroic final stand here. Funny enough, those loons actually do like 300 damage to Alariel. But yeah, the Phoenix getting surrounded now by the Goblin Great Shaman and the Black Orcs here. Probably going to be able to do some significant damage. You can see the rest of Rider of Rohan's army has been pretty severely dealt with. Alariel is going to come around for a rear charge here. The Phoenix, I'm actually surprised at how well it's doing, because its attack and defense are pretty good in sustained combat. It's also going to get a little bit more healing there from the Heart of Avalorn, Star of Avalorn rather. Goblin Great Shaman actually ends up taking some damage here in this fight, despite everything, but obviously it's not enough. He's got way too much HP left. Although the Heart of Avalorn puts Alariel at her healing cap, gets the Phoenix close to its healing cap without it even getting a rebirth, which is pretty impressive, honestly. It's not going to be enough. Alariel just getting destroyed by the spider here. Oof. And then turns to the Phoenix, and that should be pretty much it. Black Orcs, of course, doing a huge amount of work as well. Unsung Heroes. Good game to ride at Rohan. It was a fun one. You know, after him beating me up so much lately, it's, yeah, he, in this session, specifically wanted to practice against some of the tougher matchups for High Elves, which is why we were playing this one. And, yeah, you see why it's tough, because this build's pretty solid. I mean, the Rangers are such a weird one for me, as a unit. I actually don't like using them very much, even though they're pretty good. If they get into chaff units, they can blend them up pretty well, but just they're squishy against enough things that at 600 points, it's kind of hard sometimes to make them pay for themselves. Here they did okay. Credit to the Wolf Chariots, though, shutting down the Lothern Seaguard for the most part and not allowing them to get much value. I mean, these things are 550 points each, right? Yeah, so considering that, they are very cost-effective in that role. Good damage from the Hammer of Gork, and the blinded debuff also very critical. Black Orcs, 1600, 1499. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Black Orcs are, in my opinion, the best heavy infantry unit, kind of all around, if you include great weapons and sword and shield and halberd infantry. If you include all elite heavy infantry, I'd probably put Black Orcs at number 1 just because of their HP, mass, buffs. Anyway. Goblin Great Shaman also, huge amount of value, almost 4,000 value here. Very fun lord to use. Can be risky, like I said, his leadership is really not great for someone this expensive, but it's a fun one. Alariel doesn't get a lot of damage here, but does a lot of healing. Arcane Phoenix also, probably my favorite monster for the High Elves. If you're going to take any monster, you basically only have flying monsters, right? And I do think the Arcane Phoenix is the best. It has some advantages of the dragon. It's not as squishy as the other 2 Phoenixes, and it has pretty good weapon strength. In fact, let's just go ahead and look. Yeah, I quickly wanted to highlight those. So the Silver Helms you saw earlier. Anyway, yeah, the Arcane Phoenix. So, speaking of monster caster mounts, also Techless has one of these, but let's ignore that for now and just talk about the unit itself. So, at 1850, it is more expensive than the least expensive dragon, but you can see the stats are really comparable, actually, to the Sun Dragon. Like, it's 150 points more. Instead of the breath attack, you get the double vortex cone, a little bit less weapon strength, charge, and melee defense, but literally the same melee attack. Keep in mind, though, the Arcane Phoenix, much faster. Like, 25 speed faster is a huge difference. 20 extra leadership, 10 extra armor, plus it has physical resistance and fire resistance, which for some reason the dragons that deal fire damage don't have fire resistance. I always found that a little bit odd. Not to mention, also gets 10% damage resistance when your Winds of Magic is above 50%, which is above 15, right? I believe. You know, also fire rebirth, which the dragons lack. So in many ways, it's comparable to like a low-tier dragon, but with a lot of upsides. Another big upside that you don't see on the card is a smaller hitbox. You know, it's kind of related to the speed. It's just more responsive, faster overall, and because it's smaller, it's easier to get in and out of tight situations and windows. So overall, I mean, this is not exactly what I intended to be this video to be about, but we're here, so why not just end with this? Arcane Phoenix is the best monster for the High Elves. I'm just going to say it. Flamespire is the cheapest, but the low armor, the low weapon strength, you know, just low overall stats means it's really not that great of a unit. Frostheart Phoenix, a little bit better in some ways, but doesn't have the rebirth, and also just worse, you know, stats overall. A little bit more defensive, but really not what you want from a monster, which is usually offensive output. So the Arcane Phoenix has that, has the rebirth, has some AoE damage, smaller, faster than a dragon, less HP, oh, even more HP than a Sun Dragon, wow, which is pretty interesting, kind of in between this Moon and Sun. So anyway, that's that in terms of monster mounts for Caster Lords. So this is something that, you know, I'm maybe not everyone agrees with me on this, and for the most part now, most Caster Lords have monster mounts when you actually stop and think about it, right? Like if we go to the Beastmen, I mean, none of their lords have monster mounts, so that's not really a fairest comparison, but you can say that they have the same mounts as the basic lords do, right? Bretonnia is an exception. Prophetesses, in my opinion, should have access to hippogriffs. Just why not? It's not like they're going to be that good even with them. Anyway, I mean, they might be slightly better. You would probably see them slightly more. Like, you know, if we had a hippogriff prophetess, I think the beast prophetess in particular you might see a little bit in the current meta, but that's one that I do think Bretonnia, they could use it. They're not the greatest faction right now. Again, you go to Dark Elves, they have it, right? Black Dragons for Supreme Sorceresses. Dwarfs, Caster Lords kinda have the same mount as none of the other lords, so let's just ignore them for now. Empire, I mean, they only have one Caster Lord right now, which is a shame in and of itself, and he doesn't have access to Griffin. I get that Balthazar has his own unique Pegasus, that's fine, whatever, maybe he shouldn't have a monster mount, but it would be cool if he had a Griffin, or even better, a Steam Tank, which is not loreful at all, but it's, again, very cool. Greenskins, now you've got the Goblin Great Shaman with access to the Spider Mount. Even legendary caster Azag has Skull Muncha. Wurzag doesn't, but he's more of a pure, caster. So it makes sense for him to be on horseback, kind of like with the Fey Enchantress being on Silveron. High Elves, again, their Supreme Sorceress has the Moon Dragon. If we go on to Lizardmen, Lizardmen are an interesting one because the legendary Slann has a mount. Other Slans do not, and this is the one where I would say that's probably fine. I do think if you were to give an Ancient Stegodon mount to all of the Slans, that would be too much. And I also don't know if that's loreful. You guys, the lore beards, would have to correct me on that one. Norska, again, doesn't have any Caster Lords, so they do have a couple available in campaign only, and I have been pushing for a long time to get Creative Assembly to add these guys to multiplayer. They still do not for whatever reason. Maybe I need to do a more public campaign, but both of these guys are actually monster Caster Lords, so that would be cool. They're already there, they're just not implemented. Skaven, again, monster mounts for Caster Lords. The only mount you can take, in fact, for the Grace here is not a terror-causing monster, but it is a large, armored single entity in many ways that's functional as a monster. I mean, literally, Throt has a Broodwhore, which is an actual monster, right? Same thing for the Warlord. They're not even casters, but anyway, kind of more Sport Lords, but like Ikit, Warlock Masters have Doom Wheels, right? So, again, we see the pattern continue there. Tomb Kings, I mean, yeah, they're caster lords. I guess Cetra has a monster mount. Kotep has an artillery mount. That's enough, right? Coast is, again, another weird one. I don't know. It would definitely make Harkon less unique and probably less viable if you could take the Fleet Admirals, especially with pistols, on like a Deathshriek Terrorgeist. Be interesting. I don't know. Or Necrofex, which is obviously the other monster mount for Noctilus only. I kind of like having that be unique to Noctilus, though. So, again, we're going to kind of skip Vampire Coast because they have all casters, right, for lords, and a lot of them do have monster mounts. So anyway, vampire counts, yeah, same thing. I mean, their generic caster lords are, all their lords are casters, so it's kind of hard to compare, but a lot of them do have monster mounts. Warriors of Chaos, they were probably one of the first in Game 1 even. They had Chaos Dragons for their sorcerers, which is awesome. A lot of fun, especially with Lore of Fire. And then Wood Elves, they have Eagles, which, you know, no Glade Dragon for the Spellweavers. Again, I don't know if there's a lore thing there, maybe just a balance consideration. Given what all the other Elven factions have, I don't see it being that overpowered to give them a caster Dragon Lord, but let me know what you guys think. They have monster casters in the Ancient Treemen and Durthu, of course, so it's not like it's a unit class they lack necessarily, so I guess my point in all of this, really, in discussing each of these factions, monster caster lords, as this video now gets quite long, is if Empire gets caster lords, they need access to Griffins, just please. And then for Bretonnia, can we also get Hippogriffs for the Prophetess? I mean, is that, you guys, again, you lorebeards, let me know if that's something that's completely forbidden, or is it something that's possible to do? If it's possible to do, I think we should definitely see that. Anyway, that's my essay for today. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.